Hey everyone, welcome back to a Fast Five. Today we're talking about ways to save money on produce, but not all produce. We're specifically talking about bagged produce. Pretty simple, the kind that comes in a bag. And what I mean by that is things like lettuce, potatoes, lemons, apples, all of those things. So let's get into the first one. Now, you may not realize this, but just because this bag says 5 pounds, the weight can actually vary between about 10 to 15%. So that comes out to when you're picking out your bags, I want you to hold two of them at the same time and see if one feels heavier than the other. A friend of mine actually goes and she feels out a couple of them, and then the one or two that she feels are the heaviest, she will actually go weigh them just to make sure. And a lot of times she says she can find, instead of a 5 pound bag of potatoes, she can get upwards of 6.5 pounds. And it doesn't really matter how much the bag weighs, because whether it's 3.5 pounds or 6.5 pounds, you're still paying that same price. So keep that in mind, that the weight can vary and that you should honestly try to find the heaviest bag that you can. Now, speaking of how much it weighs, you really need to do your homework and look at the price per pound. Typically, a lot of produce that you find in bags, like apples, also come as individual pieces. Now, the bag itself, its weight can vary. So if you're going to get a 3 pound bag of apples, make sure that your bag weighs as close or more than 3 pounds. And the reason for that is because if you were to go pick out these gala apples and you just picked them out individually, you're going to pay $1.37 per pound, which is going to be more than if you bought a bag. Okay. Now, if you end up buying a bag that only weighs 2.5 pounds, you're going to end up paying $1.42 per pound, which is more than if you had picked it out individually. See what I mean? Also, keep in mind that not every store has amazing marketing practices. One of my local stores a couple months back, they had the loose apples for 99 cents a pound. That is a great deal. And then when I got to the supermarket, at the very front of the produce department, they had this huge display of the 3 pound apples. I mean, it even had a big sign, it had balloons. It was very obvious. Look at me, here's the apples. Here's the kicker. Those apples in the 3 pound bag were on sale, quote unquote, for $4.97 for a 3 pound bag. Well, that was way more expensive than the per pound rate. But here's the part that really got me. Those bags of apples were not even on sale. That was just their normal price. And so while I'm standing over where the per pound apples are, I saw multiple people walking into the produce department, seeing that big display and just grabbing those apples, assuming that that was either the apples on sale or that was a great deal or a sale, grabbed them and kept going. Nobody ever walked over to where the apples per pound were. So I want you to look at both and determine which is a better value. And just remember, if you get that bag, go ahead and weigh it. You might get funny looks. It doesn't matter. Make sure that 3 pound bag actually weighs 3 pounds or more. Third tip is you really need to figure out how much you need. Now, in some instances where it's lemons, you may only need 1 to 2 lemons, whereas a 2 pound bag of lemons is typically about 7 to 8 for 2 pounds. Roughly speaking, it's 4 lemons to a pound. But in some stores, specifically Aldi is very bad about this. And what I mean is that when you go there, you can't just pick out one green pepper. You have to pick out a 2-pack or a 3-pack. What you need to decide, do I need all of those? Is it better to go get it somewhere else where I can pick individually? And with lemons, very common. If you don't plan on using all these lemons and they're going to go bad before you use them, it probably was better to pay a per item price that was a little bit higher, because if you're buying in bulk and you're not using the whole thing, you're really just throwing away money, even though it may have been cheaper per pound. Now, if you do find a good deal on a price per pound or a bag, Like, say, for those instance, lemons, you only need 1 to 2 this week, but you get a bag of 8 of them. You can freeze them. In lemons, you can freeze lemon slices, you can freeze them whole, you can freeze lemon juice, you can freeze lemon zest. There are a lot of options. In fact, the majority of fruits and vegetables can be frozen for later. And really, all you have to do is lay them out on a piece of parchment paper, on a sheet pan, put them in the freezer, let them freeze for an hour or two, then take them off the pan, put them in a Ziploc, make sure to date them so that way you always use the oldest ones first. And then, boom, you have pre-stocked for later. This is how we catch up, and we can get things at really great prices, and we can use them for multiple weeks instead of just paying what the price of lemons or apples or anything is later. We can actually capitalize when the prices are low. Now, anytime I run into the grocery store, it doesn't matter what I'm there for, I am always going to check for produce markdowns. Okay, here's 2 that I recently got. At Kroger, they put a lot of their produce in these red bags. And sometimes they'll have them stuffed full, sometimes they're a little small. But in this instance, I was able to get 3 red organic bell peppers that are typically about $2 a piece. I got 3 of them for 99 cents. The other bag was 2 green bell peppers that were not organic, and these 2 zucchinis that were just starting to kind of maybe not look so great, just a few wrinkles. So what I do is I take these bell peppers, I go ahead and clean them, and I chop them, and I just throw them into a Ziploc bag. These ones don't necessarily have to be done on a sheet pan first, and then I just use the zucchini that night. Another one is a local store to me had these mushrooms. They were baby bellas, and they were 50 cents for an 8-ounce container. These are typically about $4 for an 8-ounce container. I ended up buying 4 of them. I went ahead and sliced them all up, laid them out on my sheet pan because I didn't want like a giant clump of mushrooms. Once they'd started to get hard, then I put them all in a Ziploc bag, and then any item, any meal that I was cooking that needed mushrooms, I could just take a handful or 2 and throw them in there and use them that way. There are so many markdowns at the stores that people just walk right by. This is produce that has just started to wrinkle, that just needs to be used up right away or frozen right away. This is where you're going to save the biggest amount. And honestly, I have found some amazing, amazing deals. Now, your bonus tip here is that there are just some items that you cannot freeze. It's very difficult to preserve for later. Those are typically going to be your lettuces. The only exception here is spinach. You can definitely freeze spinach in its raw form and use it for later. Same with kale, actually. But when we're talking about romaine lettuce, leaf lettuce, iceberg, you're just not going to be able to freeze this. And honestly, you can't can it either. So if you were to buy like a 3-pack or one of these large packs for really cheap and you're just not going to be able to finish it, I encourage you to share it, whether that be with your neighbor, with your friends, with your family. Just let them know, hey, I've got a whole bunch of lettuce. It needs to be used up right away. Can you have this for dinner? Because this is how we're going to avoid food waste. Because if you buy something and you don't use it, you threw your money in the garbage with that produce item. I know it's harsh, but that's really how it is. So make sure that whenever possible, if you cannot freeze it, you cannot use it, make sure that you share it. And by the way, if you think that's weird about sharing it, I cannot tell you how many times I have gone over to my neighbor's house and been like, hey, I've got so many oranges left over. I've got this big bag of lettuce that I'm just not going to get to. Do you want it? Never, ever, ever has anyone said, oh my God, why are you asking me this? The majority of the time they say, oh yes, I would love to use that. Or sometimes they say, you know what, I'm just not a big fan. And I said, that's fine, just wanted to check, no biggie. And then I just ask the next one. It's super easy. It doesn't have to be complicated. And trust me, all that is in your head. It's not a real thing. So if you have any questions about anything that you want to see us do a fast 5 on to save, please let me know. Please also let me know down in the comments below what are other ways that you are saving on your produce.